Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. We are going back in time to do an all-time classic. I cannot believe it's taken 167 episodes, is it, for us to get to this album? But we are talking about Symphony X and the Divine Wings of Tragedy, one of the all-time classic prog metal albums from the 90s. But before we get there, how are you, my friend?
I'm all right. I'm alive. To quote the great Halloween and/or Blind Guardian, I'm alive.
Well, there you go. I have to be honest. I was away this week. I came back. I feel like 1,000 new singles have dropped. It was quite the week in music. So I think we should get into some of that before we talk about Symphony X. Let's start with the new Ido Falashi single. I was a huge fan of his last album, and he came out with a new single, which I have to say, very, very good. And if the album is any indication, we're in for a real treat once again.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Really brought me back to that rebirth era of Angra, with a little bit of that kind of Alma flair, thrown in there. I guess Alma's not really a band anymore, because the guitarist is now in Angra, kind of taking the place of Kiko, who is now in Megadeth. So it looks like Idu's just kind of doing the solo thing. And yeah, that last album was great. So I'm excited for this, and I kind of didn't realize it was happening until I chatted with Anthony, who's like the world's biggest Idu fan, and he mentioned it on my Twitch stream last night of all things, and so I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize he had anything coming out. And then next thing you know, there's a single and a music video out today. Tenochtitlan. My ancient Mayan is a little rusty, but I think I said that correctly. But yeah, really good tune. I enjoyed that quite a bit, and it definitely got me excited for the rest of the album.
Definitely a reason why I didn't lead with the name of the single. So thanks for taking one for the team there. Anything else that you heard that was kind of catchy? I know the new Theocracy single came out as well. That was a pleasant surprise. I'm not even sure I knew that they were coming out with anything new, but their new single, Return to Dust, came out last week. I thought it was very good. If you like, Matt Smith's writing style, this is certainly in the same vein as his older material. I thought it was definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, they had made an announcement not too long ago that they had a new album on the horizon, and the album's going to be called Mosaic. It's slated to come out on October 13th, and yes, this is the first single from it, and it definitely is definitely what you want to hear from Theocracy, and I think it bodes well for what the rest of the album is going to sound like. So yeah, looking forward to that. Big fan of these guys, and I thought that they did such a great job playing at Prague Power. Was it... Shit, my mind is blank. When they filled in for somebody, they filled in for Ancient Bards, I believe.
Back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Them and While Heaven Wept came in as replacement bands, and I will never forget them doing that cover of Time by Angra in honor of Andre Matos' passing. That was really amazing.
That cover was fantastic.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was standing next to you, and then next thing I know, I feel a tap on my shoulder, and on the other side of me is Ralph, just like he came down from his seat because he knew how cool that was, and so cool moment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I thought their last album, Ghost Ship, was really good, but damn, that was 6 years ago, so they are definitely due. 7 years ago. I'm sorry.
For the album, yeah, no, it's been a long time. I have a feeling that they will really kind of, and I don't know why I say this, but I feel like they're going to push this and possibly try to get on a tour or something. Like, I feel like they're going to really try to make the most of the new music, because they're due. I mean, I feel like they don't really do much outside of Atlanta, and then I know sometimes they get booked for some European festivals, but they're fewer and further between.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're better than what they're I don't know what the word I'm looking for is here, but I think they're a better band than their popularity would have you believe, I guess, would be what I'm getting at here.
I would not disagree with that. Any other singles that you checked out this week?
Yeah, quite a few. I won't name them all, but Within Temptation has been like slowly dropping singles over the last few years, and it turns out that the majority of these singles that they've released are going to be on their upcoming album, which is called Bleed Out. And that's going to be released on October 20th, a week after Theocracy. But the single Bleed Out was released today. Already out is Wireless, The Purge, Don't Pray For Me, Shed My Skin, and Entertain You. These are all songs that are going to be on this album. It's 11 tracks, but there's already 6 of them are already out. So shouldn't be too much of a surprise of how this is going to go. It's still it's in that kind of vein of what Within Temptation's been doing, which is a very radio friendly symphonic metal. I would be the way I would put it. Nothing that they've done in a while has really knocked my socks off. I think I would probably say Unforgiving, which came out 12 years ago, which is insane to me. But that was the last album that really, I really loved from them. I thought that Hydra was very unbalanced. I thought that the 4 tracks with the random guest vocalists were phenomenal, but the rest of the album was just kind of unbalanced. And I don't know. I thought Resist was just kind of okay. I don't know that Within Temptation is never going to make a bad album in my opinion, but I just there's something about their new kind of style that just doesn't suck me in the way that everything from Mother Earth to Unforgiving did. So did you listen to it? I'm curious if you had a different vibe.
I did, and it was weird for me because the way they are billing this album, they're trying to make it seem like it's a seismic shift in approach and just that they're doing something so completely different for them. And to me, it's basically the same type of thing they've been doing for the last decade. And I don't know. It's not bad. I can certainly listen to it. But much like the band we're going to talk about later, I think the earlier material just blows away a lot of the new stuff. Again, not that it's bad. It's just not seismic or this it's not really moving the needle much for me. It's just I can listen to this.
It's hard to be seismic when you've been slowly releasing the singles for the last 3 years. Yeah. It's kind of it's not a big surprise if you've been listening to the singles, which we have. So I pre-ordered the album. They're an all-time band for me. I thought they kicked ass when they opened for Iron Maiden. Yeah, I just, I'm with you on that. Just kind of have a soft spot for the old stuff. Did we, on last week's episode, did we talk about the new Angra single? Was that something we
Yes, I think we did. And just going back to that, it's interesting because now you have Angra and Edu, like we talked about earlier, both doing solo stuff, and it's amongst some of the best work that either has done. So really, really interesting stuff. I have to say, I thought he was a great fit for the band for what it was, but they did lose me a little bit after Temple of Shadows. So hearing really a resurgence of that old sound on both fronts, kind of nice. I like it.
Yeah, it's cool. I guess I'll mention one other thing. This one came to us via our friend Nops, and it's a band called Atomic Symphony, who I'd not heard of before. The song's called Enslaved. It's from their album Nemesis, which came out this year, and really gave me kind of Avatarium kind of vibes, with this very sultry female vocals, proggy, but has a little bit of a doomy kind of sound to it. I thought this was really good. Nops has definitely becoming like the secret weapon of finding like these obscure bands. So I thought this was another really cool find from him. So cheers to Knops for another cool find.
Yeah, I agree. That was enjoyable. He had sent me another album actually as well, but I knew about this one and I gave it a bunch of listens this week and I really enjoyed it. And the band is Hemina. They're out of Australia. The album is called Romancing the Ether. And I've been listening to this band pretty much since day one. Somehow they were on my radar from the very beginning. A really, really modern progressive metal album, but just thoroughly enjoyable, not terribly long, easy to digest, definitely worth a listen. And another album that I had kind of spent some time with this week is a band called Soraya Sign. They're like a melodic hard rock band out of Sweden, and they do it just about as well as anyone. The album itself is called The Lion's Road, and I don't think it's overly complex, but when something is done well, you just sit back and enjoy it. This is, as far as I know, was their second album, and I have to say, I think I liked it even more than the first.
Was it on Frontiers?
It ironically enough, it wasn't, but it could have been. Like if you listen to them, you'd say this is clearly on. This is clearly. Actually, you know what? I'm lying. They are a Frontiers band. Who am I? I didn't think they were, but you know what? They are, and it makes sense because they sound like it. So I stand corrected. They most certainly are, and not surprisingly so.
There you go. Well, some things just are meant to be, I suppose.
But done well. And now, we haven't covered a Symphony X album since March of 2021, which is surprising to a certain extent. But what's more surprising is that we haven't done this particular album, The Divine Wings of Tragedy, which came out in November of 1996, before we even knew who Symphony X was, which is kind of interesting. I guess I'll start by asking, why did you choose this album and why did you choose it this week?
'Cause I chose it because if I recall, it came up in discussion recently, and I more than once I feel like, and we were both kind of like, how is it that we haven't talked about this, because this is kind of this is an all timer. A lot of people would definitely consider this a Desert Island album. I certainly do, at least as far as prog goes. But I think you just kind of explained it. We haven't talked about the band in a long time. This album needs to be discussed, and it just seemed like the right time, and it felt like I hadn't really chosen anything outside of the prog power realm in a while, so thought I would go back. And like I said, there's a few bands that we talked about that we haven't returned to for a second conversation. And I don't know, to me, we discussed the 5 album, that and Divine Wings. I think I would consider the two masterpieces that Symphony X has done. I'm a big fan of Twilight In or Twilight Of, I always forget which, Olympus. Yeah, those 3 albums to me are just like, I feel like a lot of bands have like their trilogy of albums that from the 90s that we remember. Like, I think of Master of the Rings, Time of the Oath, Better Than Raw, or, Angels Cry, Holy Land, Fireworks, like, Episode, Visions, Destiny. There's just like, the 90s trilogies or whatever. For me, like this, I think 5 sneaks into 2000, but those 3 albums, man, I would put those up against any band's like 3 best. So good. But this one might be the best out of all of them. I'm going to be curious to see where our rankings land in comparison to the new Mythology suite, and I'd like to think that at some point in the future we'll hit up Twilight and Olympus as well.
I would agree with 99% of what you just said. I think that Twilight and Olympus is probably the third of the big 3 for them. I think that once they toured like crazy for the new Mythology suite. They came out with the Odyssey in 2002. I think they were kind of pressured to get it out because I'm sure they were riding high off their wonderful album that came before it. And it has its moments. It really does. But I don't think it's as complete a package as the albums that came before it. And then after that, they completely lost me with a bunch of their new stuff. That would be an interesting conversation, to go back to some of these albums that people just love, like Paradise Lost or Iconoclast, and just go back and see what we think of that, because I never gave them the right time of day, but that's because I didn't like them after I heard them a bunch of times. I listened to them and then they just never grabbed me and I never went back to them. So I think that would be an interesting exercise, but I agree with you. Twilight and Olympus would be a really fun album to cover. And it's kind of not really talked about in the pantheon of Symphony X albums, at least by, newer fans. They never talk about that. They'll talk about Divine Wings. They'll talk about the new Mythology suite, but they never talk about Twilight and Olympus. I'm not sure why. I think it deserves to be up there.
It's interesting because to me, as much as I love Divine Wings of Tragedy, I think that Smoke and Mirrors, which is the opening track on Twilight and Olympus, might be better than anything on Divine Wings. I think that song is that good. But you also have Church of the Machine, In the Dragon's Den, Through the Looking Glass. There's a lot of really good songs, and I'll mention it now. The live album that the band released in 2001 called Live on the Edge of Forever. Boy, how we talk about and Symphony X and Camelot are usually the two bands that we tend to focus our discussion on when we talk about this, but bands that just don't seem to pull some stuff out of the old hat, so to speak, as far as material goes, and kind of stick to that same-ish set list with not a lot of love given to the old days. And I was looking at this album and just looking at the list of songs on it, and holy shit, if there was ever a perfect, for me, Symphony X set list, it's this, because the whole first disc is just pretty much the best of the new Mythology suite, and then the second disc is just like the best of everything that came out before that, including a 20-minute live rendition of the Divine Wings of Tragedy, the song. But, Smoke and Mirrors, Church of the Machine, Through the Looking Glass, Sins and Shadows, Sea of Lies. I mean...
All right, I'm going to depress you for a little bit. There was a time you had left for college, and I was home, and Symphony X would go through and play L'Amour's what seemed like every other month. They were touring the shit out of Five, right? And this was before the Odyssey, and before they would, I think this was even before they opened for Blind Guardian in Times Square, which was a really awesome show. And I think you were there, if I'm not mistaken. You came
I was not. I didn't see
Okay.
Symphony X until Prague Power, believe it or not.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, well, before that show, I remember Symphony X doing a headline show at L'Amour's, and they played this entire set list in New York. I still remember the show, and I'll tell you why. They went on exceptionally late. It had to be like 12:45 in the morning, and I was getting really tired. It was about 3 o'clock, and then all of a sudden they start playing the Divine Wings of Tragedy in its entirety. I'm like, I can't leave. I got to stay for another 20 minutes. And I wound up getting home after 4 o'clock in the morning watching this set list, but I couldn't leave. It was one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Oh, I'm very jealous. I also really wish that this is a band that I have been talking about for probably 15 years, as needing to release some sort of DVD or Blu-ray concert, and they never have. And there's so little pro-shot live Symphony X video out there, which is a shame because they're such a great live band and they have such good material. But man, if they had released a DVD of this live show, oh my God, I would have bought it day one. Just fantastic. I still have a copy of the CD, and speaking of the Odyssey, I remember that was one of the many albums I bought at Prague Power 3. I had this backlog of albums that I hadn't purchased because I was in college, just didn't have any money, and I brought like a chunk, I don't know, $75-$80 with me, and blew it all on CDs, and it was great because they were all like $10.
Yeah, no, I was. I remember we all walked away with stacks of albums that we didn't get our hands on.
I remember like Ed Guy's Mandrake, Symphony X's The Odyssey, the Misa Mercuria album, which we mentioned a few weeks back. Just like a whole pile of stuff that I think I had gotten Angra's Rebirth album. I'm not sure, or maybe the EP that followed. But I just had like this list of stuff that had come out in the last year or two that I was just hadn't purchased. And oddly enough, I also bought the Damnation game by Symphony X because I never had it on disc, and they were selling it for like, I remember it being like $6 or something like really cheap. And I'm like, oh, that's one to kind of fill out the collection. So
and that's another interesting album. And I know we're all over the place with this, but there's about 3 or 4 tracks on that album that are just fantastic.
Oh my God. A Winter's Dream is such a sick song.
Yeah, and I've always been partial to Dress to Kill. I think that's a great song. Certainly The Edge of Forever, which is the epic track on that album.
Yeah, the title track is a real banger too.
Exactly. But let's talk about Divine Wings. As I mentioned earlier, came out in November of '96. Hard to get album. Inside Out Music in Europe would pick it up and eventually release it in March of 1997. And for many, it would be the classic Symphony X lineup, right? This is Russell Allen on vocals, Michael Romeo on guitar, Michael Pennella on keys, Jason Rulo on drums, and Thomas Miller on bass. And what I thought was so fascinating, and I think that this is something to really take note of, the album or the music was really, in many ways, a three-headed monster. Romeo, Pennella, and Miller. And I have to say, I think that the band might be suffering from a lack of Miller's songwriting because, again, when he left the band, it wasn't as, I don't know. Like I said, I think the New Mythology suite was great, but like when he left the band, everything just seemed to go south for me. And again, I know a lot of people might disagree with that.
Well, I won't. I'll tell you what I did not know. I did not know that this album was released in Japan in 1996 and didn't come out anywhere else until 1997. I always considered it a 1997 release, and here we go again, nitpicking on years. But
I had
did not
it as
know
a
that.
97 release as well, but technically it was released, in 96 in Japan.
Yeah.
But
that's do you remember hearing a lot about albums that only came, like, this is an American band, and their album came out significantly earlier in Japan than anywhere else in the world. I remember having to import this album.
I remember how I got the album, and I spent a fortune on this thing. I'll tell that story quickly. Everybody in the Prague circle was talking about this particular album, and I got it, I want to say in 1998, and I believe, I'm 99% sure I ordered it from CD Now. And here I am spending $25 back then, right? So that's probably $40 today, $35 today on an album from a band that I could probably have driven to Jersey for cheaper than I did to import the stupid album. And I remember when it came and I looked at the cover and I was just like, wow, I really enjoyed the cover art. There was something very church-like, I guess, in a sense. It almost reminded me of like the stained glass window like you saw in the background with what looked like the Virgin Mother praying in the foreground. I mean, it was like just really a cool album cover. And I knew that I wanted to hear it, but I had no idea what the band sounded like. So I remember taking the disc, playing it in my room, and sure enough, the second that opening riff of Sins and Shadows came on, I was like, oh boy, we are in for a treat. You could just tell that the album was great 10 seconds into the album. I mean, I remember having that like epiphany, if you will. And I got to be honest, the next 65 minutes did not disappoint because this album is an all-time classic.
I am fairly certain I got the album similarly. I'm pretty sure I ordered it, and it was just because of the word of mouth, which wasn't much. I mean, it was probably just Pat. But it's a big mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, yeah, I want to say he probably said like, this is a massive hole in your collection if you don't have this. So I'm pretty sure I went a similar route. I don't remember if I got this or Twilight and Olympus first. I remember getting them both fairly close to one another, but I don't remember which. But it was weird. Like, I hadn't thought about it in a while, but Symphony X was not a band that was on a U.S. label until maybe New Mythology Suite, and then
well, that's when Inside Out America, I think, picked them up and started.
Right, and then they released the back catalog. But yeah, at the time, like, you're right. It's so odd that we would be importing. We could have driven over to Michael Pinella's house and just asked him for a CDR of it, probably for less money.
It's so true, but
not nowadays with what they charge you to go over the George Washington Bridge. But
at the time, the time, but no, it's like I said, it was a wonderful time. The band just toured so much around this area, and every time they would go out to Europe, they do warm up shows in Brooklyn or New Jersey. And I think, other than Dream Theater, I think I've seen this band more than any other. I think I've seen them at least 13 or 14 times, which is crazy. And that doesn't count like the last 10 years where I think I've seen them once. So I'm telling you, during those early days, I was seeing them what seemed like 3 or 4 times a year. But I was definitely spoiled. But let's get into it, because this album kicks off with, like I said, Of Sins and Shadows, which, simply put, is a very memorable, in-your-face prog metal classic in many ways. And don't let anything fool you. This is not prog rock, right? This is prog metal through and through, and just a phenomenal opening track. The drums and the guitars on this particular track just really pop. And I feel like the keyboards play such a nice complement to the drums and the guitars. And something that I'm often critical of, but I thought that the backing vocals, not only on this song, but throughout the album, are just so tastefully done, almost in almost like a church choir. But it's just really well done. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the chorus, which is just one of those sing-along choruses that just make for a phenomenal live song.
I don't even know how to follow that. Yes to all those things. Like you had mentioned before, like the first time you put this album in, and you just start with this, I was absolutely floored. I mean, that almost like harpsichord sounding the keyboard that, again, at the time really, I think when I think about this album, I think of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, because I would listen to this album while I played the game. And I felt like there was
perfect accompaniment. I mean, it really is in many ways. This could have been the soundtrack to the game. Yeah,
absolutely agree. I really like this song. I remember I used to play this in Marsik's car when we would drive to school, and there was only enough time to like hear the first 3 tracks before we were already there. But my God,
what did he think of it?
I don't think he knew what to make of it. Like, okay. He said he liked it, but I think he was, I don't think he had ever heard anything like that. I mean, we were kind of, I think, prepped by the time we got this album, and we had heard enough stuff that it wasn't like, it was mind blowing in a way, but at the same time, it wasn't like surprising or shocking. But I was the other day, I was driving and I was driving from my parents' house back to my house, and I had just enough 15 minutes or so I popped in the beginning of the album, and literally door to door, it started with Of Sins and Shadows and ended right as Out of the Ashes ended. And it's just like, boy, I mean, throw in the accolade, like, is there a better first 4 songs on an album ever? Like, holy shit.
Yeah, side A of this album is outstanding, and I have thoughts, but let's get into it. Obviously, a great opener, and Sea of Lies is arguably arguably a better follow-up even. How many songs start with a bass solo? This might be the only
Not
one.
enough.
Yeah, apparently, because it's fantastic. And I got to be honest, not only is it a bass solo that starts the song, but the bass is really prominent throughout this entire song. And I was a little sick of this track just because, I don't know, the one song that they would go back to in the archives and play an old song, it would be Sea of Lies. For some reason, that was always the song they dipped back into the archives on. I was a little sick of this song. But having not listened to it and giving the benefit of hindsight, it was refreshing to hear it again this week. And this song the luster is back on. Really, really powerful vocals. And I have to say, it is so nice to not hear the angry Russ or the angry Russell Allen vocals. His natural voice, like his clean vocals, if you will, they're phenomenal. And I just don't know why he feels the need to play like Rockstar in many ways with the new stuff. Because in spots, I have no issue with it, but let the clean voice just permeate everything because it's just so good. And it's almost like a fine wine. Like it just accompanies the music so well. And like I said, certainly with this track, Sea of Lies, another live favorite for sure. It's like I said, it's the only one they really go back to in many cases and play live now.
Yeah, this song to me like really epitomizes what a lot of this album is like, where you have these kind of slower acoustic parts, and then it starts to crunch in, like it jumps back into that like heavy and a little bit faster of a sound, and you'll hear it throughout. Particularly the Accolade and Candlelight Fantasia, which like would be ballads if there weren't parts of the song that were absolutely rocking. And you see a little bit of this here. I want to say this song's a little bit slower than of Sins and Shadows, but man, it just the crunch on this, like it just and again, kind of echoing what we said about Superior's Behind album. The production on this thing is unbelievable for an album this old to sound this good, and I can't imagine there was a ton of money put behind it. But man, I'm not listening to like a remastered or whatever. I'm listening to my original copy of it, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we're talking about two albums that came out within a year of each other, and I don't know that there's an album that comes out today that's better than the sound on these two albums, with Superior a couple of weeks ago and this album. The mix on this is absolutely positively superb, and every instrument really does have a chance to shine, which you can't say that about every album. So this is an absolute treat in many ways.
And the truth is that the previous album, Damnation Game, the production is not as good as this.
Not even close.
It's significantly, it's not bad, but it's just not great either. This is probably Symphony X's biggest production jump in their career is Damnation Game to Divine Wings, I would say.
I think you're right. And in many ways, I would argue that Twilight and Olympus is actually a step down in production. Slightly step down, but I think that this was maybe their best sounding album of all. I'm not sure that anything that came out later would top this, which is quite frankly fascinating. And you know, for a band like that hadn't come out with an album in the United States in 1990, before this would actually hit the States, it was amazing that you couldn't even find this thing if you wanted to. You really had to go through painstaking efforts to get it.
Yes, and we did.
Yeah, and we did, exactly. Talk to me about Out of the Ashes, the third track. This is the shortest track on the album. It's under 4 minutes. But I have a feeling that it's probably one of your favorites.
It's my song of the week. I love this song. I always have. I always thought that this should have been boss music in a Castlevania game because it's just absolute. It's just absolute like neoclassical chaos. I want to say that it's an arpeggios that they're using at the beginning. I think that's what that is. I'm not a musician clearly, but it just the way that it comes in, the pounding drums and the flying guitars and keyboards. This song is insane. And I still listen to it. I've probably listened to it a million times in my life, and I listen to it again, and I just like, damn, like I wanted something else to be my song of the week just because this is so predictable, but it's just too bad because this song just kicks that much ass. It's just in and out, and it's just amazing. I hate that I've never heard this song played live before, but an amazing song. I love it tons. So let's give it a listen, and then you can tell me why it's your least favorite song on the album.
In recent history, I cannot criticize this one at all. This is, in many ways, I think the least heralded and most underrated Symphony X song there is. People will talk about Divine Wings and people will talk about those first couple of tracks, but for me, this is the track that really sets the band apart in many ways from other bands, because this is, I don't want to say a filler track, but I just think that they packed so much punch in 3.5 minutes or 3 minutes and 40 seconds that I'm with you 100%. I think the songwriting is phenomenal here. I think that even the Russell Allen lyrics, which we don't often talk about, but the lyrics, and Russell Allen and Thomas Miller write the vast majority of the lyrics on this album, just absolutely on point. You're in, you're out, and you just, you're like, I want to hear more when it's over. It leaves you wanting more, but in the best way possible.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I will say Symphony X did, provided they chose it. This is on their one compilation album, Prelude to the Millennium. You gotta love a band who releases 4 albums and then decides they deserve to have a greatest hits. Clearly, this was a band that did, I think, deserve it. But most of this album, and I say that because Divine Wings, A Tragedy of the Song takes up about a third of the album. So most of this album is on this compilation, including the first 3 tracks we just discussed, Divine Wings and Candlelight Fantasia, along with a really cool re-recording of Masquerade, which was a song from their first self-titled album, which is the only album they've done with a different singer than Russell Allen, and so they re-recorded it with Russell Allen and the current band and the current production as well, and it's really, really cool. But this is a pretty neat little compilation. If memory serves, I think it was only released in Japan, at least initially. But yeah, Sea of Lies is on it, and so to me, it sounds like at least at that point in time, they were giving it its just due. But man, I remember this went immediately onto my next mixtape. I just thought, what a song, and just fantastic. It's definitely the most high energy song on this album, and you know me and like fast paced, high energy type stuff. Like this is why, I say that Symphony X does have a little bit of power metal in their blood, because of a song like this. It really kind of marries the power and the prog, if you will.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Now, before we talk about the accolade, this album has actually come out as the number 17th ranked progressive metal album of all time by Loudwire, and the number 8 power metal album of all time by the same magazine. So Loudwire has it as the number 17 prog metal album and the number 8 power metal album. I thought that was fascinating. I have never considered this band to be a power metal band. And although I agree that Out of the Ashes probably could be maybe a power metal track, I've never thought of the band in that light. So to have them on Loudwire's list for both genres is astounding to me.
I imagine there's probably not too many other bands, if any, that repeated the same feat, but it makes sense to me. I mean, I'm with you. I've always considered them more of a prog band, but they definitely have power metal elements that I think shine through. And there's, there's definitely bands that are considered. I know the Metal Archives considers them a progressive power metal band. I mean, for whatever that's worth. I tend to just kind of lump them in as prog metal, but yeah, there's definitely some power elements, and That song, I mean, if you had just played me that song in a vacuum and I never heard a Symphony X song ever again, I probably would have said, oh, hell yeah, they're a power metal band.
Yeah, well, I think that's fair
Not so
enough.
much if I heard the Accolade, though, which is a unbelievable prog epic, in my opinion.
I struggled so much with picking a song of the week for this album because I think you could have gone in so many different directions. I don't know that the Accolade is my favorite track. It's probably that or even Candlelight Fantasia, which I think is another absolute gem at the end. But I actually am going to pick the Accolade as my song of the week, and I'm going to tell you why. I talked earlier about Russell Allen's vocals and how I thought his delivery on these albums were just so far superior to his delivery on some of the latter albums. I don't know that there's a better example of it than there is on the Accolade. This is a beautiful tune. Very, very keyboard driven. It takes the listener on this epic journey in many ways, but there's not a single note that's misplaced or a single element of this song that wasn't like carefully crafted by the band. And this was a collaboration with Romeo, Pinella, and Miller. What a phenomenal song this is. I just think that it's the perfect complement to Out of the Ashes because it's more epic. It's definitely a ballad-y type of song, except that when it picks up so hard that, again, you can't, like you said, you can't even really classify it as a true ballad. I just think this song is fantastic. Let's give it a listen, and I certainly want to hear your thoughts, when we come back. Just an absolute beautiful song. As the power metal guy, what are your thoughts on the Accolade?
I think that this song is so perfectly placed on this album because you have these three real banger songs that open it up, and even though the first two tracks don't quite have that gallop and just ass whipping, face melting tempo that Out of the Ashes has, you can't argue that the first three songs are all bangers. And so this is, at least at the beginning, it really kind of like quiets things down. I always remembered that about this song, that it was like the perfect kind of break from the chaos in a lot of ways. And then it would kind of unveil its own chaos. But then, like, as you get a bit towards the second half of the song, like, it gets, like, really, you mentioned the album art where it feels, like, kind of churchy. And this organ sound, like, where it just slows down, it almost feels like you would hear it in the church, perhaps of the Machine, I don't know. But it fit, it makes you think, like, you look at that cover and you're like, this fits perfectly with what you're listening to, and like you said, like, there's not one wasted note. Like, this is just an absolute masterpiece of a song. And yeah, even though I am the power metal guy, man, I absolutely love this song. I always have, and like you said, it's such a perfect follow up after that blistering fast, quick in and out, borderline power metal song. Here's a song that epitomizes the prog genre, and that it has so many different types of styles that change, but yet it flows so perfectly. Really great song, and as we say, like, a 10-minute song, that feels like a 5-minute song. Just a really, really well done. there's so many cool parts of it that like it never really seems repetitive or unnecessary. Just a really, really great tune. And like I said earlier, I'll say again, for my money, some of the four of the best first four songs I've ever heard on an album. I mean, to come out that strong like that is really incredible.
And I would argue it ends exceptionally well as well with the last three songs. But where the album loses me is with the next track, the fifth track, The Pharaoh. The one song on the album that was literally written by the entire band, I think it's the worst song on the album, and I don't really think it's close. The reason I'm not going to give this album a 10 is this song. I acknowledge it's impossible to follow up those first four songs. And instead of trying, they said, you know what? We'll just take the worst song on the album and we'll just throw it right in the middle of this piece of shit. Yeah, why bother trying? It has obviously an ancient Egyptian feel to it. That being said, this was not Waking Up Tutankhamun or anything like that. The instrumentality is on full display here for sure. But the chorus is just so weak in my opinion and so bland. Good verses, I'll give it that. But I something about this is just a miss. And I don't mind the bridge. It has this whimsical quality to it. The one thing I'll say is this. I feel like every third or fourth grader does that unit on ancient Egypt. You know, like they talk about the tombs and the pharaohs and the pyramids. This should be mandatory listening. And then they should listen to the rest of the album because it gets a lot better from here. But now that I've said my piece as to why this is not a perfect album, talk to me about the Pharaoh and why it was nearly your song of the week.
This was my runner-up for no. So I'll take you through my first full listen of Divine Wings of Tragedy in probably years. I listened to the first 3 tracks. I bangers as I always remember them to be. The Accolade is just fantastic. The Pharaoh plays for about a minute and a half, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, this album might be a 10, and then that chorus comes in and just ruins the whole album. I mean, I was literally thinking the same thing, that if this was a better song, if this song had a better chorus, this album might have been a 10. But the chorus,
and because this chorus is so bad,
the rest of the song is not bad. The rest of the song is actually
but it's
good.
A terrible chorus.
Oh, the chorus is so bland and so boring. I don't get it. It just absolutely kills the album dead in its tracks. It was like on just this blistering pace of an incredible, like just I don't know. This is like, was this a B-side that they crammed on here?
But that's the irony. It's a 5.5 minute track on a 65-minute album. If they would have just left it off and left it as a 60-minute album, it would have been a 10, and there would have been enough material where you wouldn't have said, I want more. No, you would have been happy. But instead, they threw this thing in the middle, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, and it's probably not as bad as we're making it sound. It's just that the rest of this album is so good that even if this song was a 7.5 out of 10, which might be generous, it's dragging down a lot of 9s and 10s, So, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of way that I put it. I always remember that, this and the following 2 songs as being kind of that middle part of the album, and probably the 3 least appreciated songs on the album. But I have to say, the other 2 songs are really good, and this one's just not really good.
I am in complete agreement with you. The Eyes of Medusa, I used to not like. And I remember when they would play this live a lot around this time, and I'd be like, oh, here we go, The Eyes of Medusa again. But the reality is it's actually a pretty good song. And I've kind of done a 180 on this one. I love the drum patterns, and I think that, the way that the keyboards and the bass play off the drums on this are just absolutely phenomenal. And in many ways, I think the song helps show off Russell Allen's range as a singer. I think that the pacing on this one is also pretty good. It's a little bit all over the place, but I find it to be quite endearing in that regard. And, I think it's probably one of the more difficult tracks to play live because you're really showing off their continuity as a band because of how difficult this, I think, is to play. And then there's this very regal section at the end, which is just like Final Fantasy to me, which I love. Really good track. And I've come around on this one. Whereas the Pharaoh, I think they should have just kept him buried in the tomb.
You should have left him in the Pyramid of Cheops.
Yeah.
I actually am totally on board with you on the Eyes of Medusa. I remember not thinking much of it back in the day, and again, it might just be because it's like, it's in the middle of some of the best bread you've ever seen in your life, if I may use a sandwich, a sandwich analogy. But yeah, this is a really
like
good
right
tune.
In the middle of like a brioche bun. I mean, how could you not like it?
It's, you talk about the difficulty of playing it live. This whole album must be very hard to play live because they usually don't play anything from it. So maybe it's just too technically, except for Sea of Lies. Everything else is just really too hard to play. That must be it. That must be... Except when I think I've seen 7 of these tracks live at one point or another. But I'm just talking about nowadays. It probably means that all the songs on the Fourth Legacy are very complicated too, and that's why Camelot never plays any of them. So shout out to the Knights of Arabia. But this is a really good song. Probably the most... I would say I would argue this or The Witching Hour are the most underrated songs on this album. But this is a really good tune, and I think that it has kind of a purposeful kind of a gait to it. Like it really has a purposeful crunch to it, but it's not derivative. And I feel like the previous track, a really good word would be derivative to describe what they were trying to do. The Witching Hour is a really good. Eyes of Medusa is a really good song. Witching Hour was always one of my like kind of hidden gem favorites on this album. I've always really liked this song. I think like that really like fast paced bridge or the verses that before the chorus comes in. It's a speedy little tune, and I think it's the shortest song other than Out of the Ashes. But I kind of like what Symphony X does with their shorter songs because they just get in and get out, and they give you everything you need in a short amount of time. I think this is a really underrated song. It arguably would have been it might have been the runner up for me for Song of the Week. But really good song. Do you feel similar?
I do, and this is a song that nobody talks about. When people talk about the best Symphony X songs, this song never gets mentioned, and it should. It's a gem of a song, and I can understand why it doesn't hold up to some of these epics that they've kind of been known for over the years. But there are beautiful neoclassical elements throughout this entire song. Every single musician in the band, and even Russell, gets a chance to shine because it's just really well laid out and a really well constructed tune. And the solos themselves, as part of the bigger, longer instrumental section, great stuff. I just think it's really well done, but not to the point of like being self-indulgent. Just a really solid 4-minute and 15-second song, which serves as like an appetizer to the title track, which is or had been their most ambitious song to date at just under 21 minutes until the Odyssey would come out and kind of blow it out of the water. But whereas I believe the Odyssey track is exceptionally overrated, even though they continually play it live, this track is nothing short of a masterpiece. This is a masterclass in how to write an epic tune.
I'm just glad you didn't make it your song of the week, because if I had to pick a minute of it to use, I don't know what the hell I would do.
And that's why I think I shied away from it. But this is a 7-part suite, which is just one of the most epic songs you'll ever hear. It does not feel 20 minutes. I think I'd argue it barely feels 10. And I think that's just a testament to everything that's going on here. Everything from the Gregorian chants at the beginning, which is basically a tribute to Brian, to like these march-like sections, which remind me of the Wizard of Oz. It zigs, it zags, it's all over the place, but somehow it just flows beautifully. And like I said, it's the reason I couldn't leave L'Amour's at 3:00 in the morning on like whatever Sunday night or whatever it was at the time. This song just blows away the Odyssey. And I have to imagine that for someone like yourself who had never seen the band live, seeing this as the first song you ever saw from the band, you might as well have walked out after this song because it was only going to go downhill.
I should have. It was funny you should mention. I was going to bring it up, but that set was so interesting because it was Divine Wings of Tragedy, a bunch of songs from Iconoclast, and the Odyssey, which I think maybe was a grand total of maybe 6 songs because 2 of them were 40 like minutes. I'm gonna pull it up just because I'm curious, but that was my one and only time seeing this band live, and it happened to be, I believe it was supposed to be an anniversary of this album, the year that they played at Prague Power. They were headlining. They're headlining Saturday night. This was in 2012. Symphony X has played Prague Power 4 times, 3 of which were in the first 4 years of the festival's existence, and they came back for Prague Power 13 and headlined. This song, they played the Divine Wings, and then they played 2 songs from Paradise Lost and 4 songs from Iconoclast, followed by the Odyssey as the encore. And it was good, but again, you compare it to that Live on the Edge of Forever track list, and it's just like, damn, that's really kind of. I was hoping for more of a classic Symphony X, or even just a tribute to this album. And I'll say, I don't think they played Divine Wings of Tragedy anywhere else around that time. I think it was
they didn't. I'm pretty sure it was a one-off special for
and I appreciate that, but much like your experience, the band went on super late. There were some delays. Thankfully, Prague Power, this doesn't really happen anymore, where headline bands are going on after midnight. But I believe it was almost 1:00 in the morning when the band finally went on. And this is the last band on a 4-day festival, and we're just like running on fumes at this point. I think you were getting sick at the time, and
I was sick as a dog during this set, and I remember kind of muscling through Divine Wings because I loved the song. And then at some point during the set, I just left. I couldn't take it anymore.
And it was so loud. Remember how loud it was? We were like sitting up in the in the nosebleeds of a 2,000 person, venue, but we were nowhere near the stage, and it was the loudest I think I've ever heard a band in that venue.
Manowar has nothing on Symphony X, and it's not the first time I've seen them in that venue, and it's not the first time that they were way too loud. But it's funny. I'll say this before we talk about Candlelight Fantasia, which closes this thing up. Just talking about this, I kind of want to go see the band again, and I kind of want to give some of the new stuff a little bit of a listen because, like I said, I make no bones about it. I'm not a fan of the newer material, but I want to give it another shot.
I will say I dug Iconoclast. I thought it was a little bit. If you had the 2 CD version, it was a little bloated. But like Children of a Faceless God, there's some really good songs on here. It's probably my favorite of the post Odyssey Symphony X. Which is only 3 albums really. I remember Underworld was underwhelming, not to make a pun of it, but that's just kind of how I felt when it came out. And I don't really know Paradise Lost, although Eve of Seduction is a sick song. It was almost like a throwback to this Divine Wings era of Symphony X. very neoclassical and really like just kind of almost like Yngwieian in just showing like, look how good I am at this guitar. Michael Romeo, who's not quite the show off that Yngwie is. He's a little bit more modest. But getting back to the song at hand, there's I'll echo a lot of what I said about the Accolade, except it's twice as long, but there's just all these different sections and it flows together oh so well. And one of my favorite parts really is that the song, like you said, starts out with like this almost just a cappella, lyrics to open it up. Then it has this really epic intro. But my favorite part, I think, is when it slows down and you hear that piano and you're just kind of like, all right, we're 5 minutes in, 15 minutes to go, strap in because we're going to be here a while. And it's really, I love the way that it just sets up the rest of the song. It's really just a phenomenal song. And it took me years before I actually like remembered all of it because it was so big that like I always remembered the beginning, and then I would get like, you'll kill me for saying this, but I feel the same way about A Change of Seasons, is that every time I hear it, I feel like I'm listening to it for the first time because for whatever reason, I just don't digest it and keep it inside me. And I don't know why. And this song was like that for a long time for me. It's finally gotten to the point now. The only thing I find a little odd about it is that, like, I feel like it ends kind of abruptly, which is hard to do when a song's been going on for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I can appreciate that. It ends abruptly, but it ends strongly. Like it goes out like with a bit of flair.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that like it goes back again to what I was saying around that 5-minute mark, where it kind of like starts to slow down and you just hear that piano. It almost feels like there's going to be more song, and then it just kind of ends. And I guess that's maybe that's just a construct that I put together in my own mind, but it's not a knock. It's just it's certainly not the end of Pull Me Under, where it just ends for no apparent reason at all in the middle of a note, it feels like. But I always just thought it was interesting, like kind of shocking that 20 minutes in I'd be like, oh, there's not more, but
yeah, fair.
But there is an almost 7-minute song that follows it.
And I gotta be honest, it's kind of ambitious that they even bothered to put a song after, Divine Wings. But they did, and it's one of my favorite, maybe my favorite Symphony X song, and that's Candlelight Fantasia. This song is just so beautiful, and if you're a fan of The Accolade, do not sleep on this track either. I think it's a fantastic closing tune. Hearing it live once, I just completely marked out. That's how much I love this song. Sort of a ballad, at least, starting that way. But the keyboards are just play such a nice complement to the vocals. And I think the two of them married together are just absolute fantastic. It's some of Michael Romeo's more simplistic guitar work, but at the same time, it just fits so nicely with the emotional nature of this song. A gem. And if I could pick a second song of the week, I think I would pick this.
Well said. The first 2.5 minutes of the song, I'm like, I want Russell Allen to sing me to sleep every night. I mean, for a guy who can really sing some gruff sounding vocals, or what I've seen him do with TSO, where he's this Broadway style, really, really impressive frontman, but he also can sing these real soft and just, I don't know, very, very very sounding. But the song definitely picks up. It almost has in the middle of the song, it starts to get a little creepy even. And again, this is another track that I think would have fit Castlevania really, really well. The neoclassical elements mixed with the guitar virtuosity and just the incredible vocals of Russell Allen and the great keyboards, it all just comes together so well. It's such a great song. I don't know. Tell me how you feel about this, because I thought this was really interesting. But the album was released on vinyl for the first time 11 years ago. It was put out by Inside Out Music, and because of the nature of the title track being as long as it is, they had to change the order of the songs. And so on side A of the second record, you have Eyes of Medusa, Witching Hour, and Candlelight Fantasia, and then side B is just all of Divine Wings. I don't know. I feel like Candlelight Fantasia should be the last song on this album. I almost wonder if Divine Wings should have been the first song.
That's interesting. I think it makes a better opener than it does a closing tune. But then again, I think we're so conditioned to not only hope but expect to hear Candlelight Fantasia at the end that to have it any other way would be odd. So I don't love switching the tracks around, but at the same time, I know that the you're confined by the limitations of the technology, right?
Yeah, there's
so
only
that's what the vinyl
so much
requires.
space you can fit on one side of a vinyl record. I love the just the way the song fades out, and it has like this waltz like tempo, and it's such a perfect way to just end. It's like this epic but like understated ending. Just a really great way to take things out. I mean, just fantastic. I what the hell are we doing waiting this long to talk about this album? My God.
I'll say this. I'm very happy that you picked it. It was, but going back to it, I'm glad we waited in the sense that I think that it resonated even more because I had stayed away from it as long as I did, if that makes sense.
Sure. And it's a lot better than listening to Human Defects, which was a solid album, but this is just like, I think if you followed up behind with this, it might not have felt as much of a jump in quality.
Well, and to that end, I have an album picked out for next week, which I am extremely excited to talk about. I'll mention it at the end, but you gave me a great idea. I think we should do a Patreon bonus episode and just do the A Change of Seasons EP at some point. Because if you need to spend some time with that song. I've gone on record. It's my favorite song of all time. I haven't listened to it in far too long. I think that if you spend some time with it, you will appreciate it as much as you might have appreciated Divine Wings, the song, this week.
I don't know. It's going to be tough to beat out the Dream Theater cover version of Love Lies Bleeding, Funeral for a Friend, which is like the greatest Elton John song of all time. And I love Dream Theater's version of it, which is inevitably the second track on that EP. But yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I like it. Because you know me, I love that era of Dream Theater, but for whatever reason, that song, it was just almost like, it was like too grand for me to just take in. I don't know. I don't know why. I never listened.
Sounds like
I never listened to it and think that
like
it's a bad song or like I don't get it. But then it just like it's like I have short-term memory loss with that song.
Well, we will something to look forward to for sure on our Patreon. But scale of 1 to 10, Divine Wings of Tragedy, and I should note both of us gave the New Mythology Suite a 9, which is a really, really solid score. I have a feeling this will be better, but because of Pharaoh, not a 10.
Yeah, not a 10, but still a 9.75 for me. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, it's so close to perfect. It's just not my. And I'd like to think that I've stuck with this rule, so to speak. But I haven't given a lot of albums a 10. I think I've given more than you, but not by a ton. But for me, like, the reason I didn't give The Edge by Eternity X a 10 and gave it a 9.75 was because there was one song on it that just, to me, wasn't a great song. Whereas Angels Cry by Angra, to me, there are no even mediocre or good songs. Every song on the album is great. And the problem with Divine Wings is that every song on this album is not great. Almost every song on this album is great. But the rest of it is so strong. The rest of the album is a 10. So, I mean, you can't really dock it too much, but I think that this is pretty rarefied air. And other than Images and Words, I don't know that I could rank a prog metal album much higher than this.
I'm with you for the same reasons. I'm going to give it a 9.5, but I think that a 9.75 is justified. I think I'm just splitting hairs. It's a 9.5. It is one of the true classic prog metal discs, not just of the 1990s, but of all time. And I think that it was really nice to go back to and listen to it this week. So I appreciate that. And it's funny because unintentionally, we've done a slew of prog albums this month with Superior, Human Defects, this. Obviously, I don't think that was expected, but I got to be honest with you. I'm going to give you another prog album in a little bit. But before we do, a couple of news items. Dragon Force is putting the finishing touches on their new studio album, which is due out later this year. But I wanted to mention that they are going out on tour with Amaranth, Nanowar of Steel, and Edge of Paradise beginning October 20th in Mesa, Arizona, and then they conclude the tour in Los Angeles on the 19th of November. A nice tour package and kind of a unique blend of bands in many ways because they don't really sound too much alike.
Yeah, but all fun bands, but bands that I think are all great to see live. So I may have to make a little trip down to New York for the New York City show. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Honestly, Dragon Force would probably be one of the bands I'd be least excited to see of the 4 bands you just listed. So,
well, I've seen 3 out of the 4. I've not seen Nanowar of Steel, but I do know that they are playing 70,000 Tons.
Oh, their new album that came out this year was a real treat, I thought. I enjoyed the hell out of that. It's the first Nanowar of Steel album I've ever really listened to start to finish, and I really liked it a lot. You'll probably end up seeing it on my year-end list, if you can believe it.
I do. It definitely had its moments, and is comical as it was, they definitely have the chops to play power metal. So kudos to them. And speaking of the Mr. Cheops himself, Yngwie Malmsteen, the guy has 40 or 50 ideas already recorded for the next studio album. What the hell does that even mean?
I don't know, but I bet you not one of those ideas is having a decent production or a guy who can sing. So,
yeah, I agree with you. But new Yngwie in the future, I wanted to mention that.
Speaking of Yngwie, did you happen to see the set list from his first show of his current tour?
I have not.
It was last night. I again was having a chat on my Twitch stream last night, and I was asking if Yngwie. I said basically like I wouldn't have much of an interest in seeing Yngwie unless he was going to play some older material, and this is a pretty nice mix of pretty much his entire career. But there's stuff from Odyssey, Seventh Sign, Trilogy. I don't know. I think he needs to play a bit more of the older stuff for me to really get excited about it. But
is he singing on the tour?
I don't know. I don't think Yngwie has had a singer that wasn't him in a while now. But
then I don't want to go see it. I mean, the reality is he's had a who's who of singers over the years. I just don't care. Like, give me anybody. Give me anybody. But I just don't think he should be singing some of that.
No,
material.
It doesn't look like. It looks like he's handling. I mean, he's a serviceable singer, but when you think about
he's had a who's who. Yeah,
it's a legends list. Jorn Land, Tim Ripper Owens, Jeff Scott Soto, Mats Levin, Goran Edman,
Joe Lynn Turner.
Yeah, Joe Lynn Turner.
I mean, it just goes on and on.
Mark Bowles.
One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, that's some really high end vocalists there. But he could do it.
Well, anyway, one other piece of news, the new Sirchiraikan album comes out next year. I know you love this band. You love your black metal, but I
don't even know what you just said. I thought you sneezed.
I digress. I have been sitting on an album for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years since we started this podcast.
Must be nice and warm now.
Like an egg. This is a band which has recently come back together. They've re-announced or they're going back on tour, which I'm hoping, praying that they come to the United States with this thing, or 70,000 tons or something. But the album in particular is not considered to be their best album, but it is probably my favorite. And we're celebrating the 25th anniversary, as the album came out on August 21st of 1998. And that band, another prog band, is Elegy, and the album is called Manifestation of Fear. I love this album, and I don't quite know why, because I will say it's not the greatest album I've ever heard, but something about this album has always resonated with me, and I think it's time to talk about some Elegy.
I think it's because of the Friendly Farmer's own Ian Parry doing vocals.
Yeah, love me some Ian Parry.
Yeah, this is a band that I always just didn't pay enough attention to, but were one of the bands that Pat always would talk about a lot. And I remember buying the Supremacy album at Tower Records. I just remember randomly Tower Records would once in a while have an album from whatever. It was the Noise Records offshoot. I don't know if it was like TNT or whatever. Like that released the Stradivarius records or whatever. Conception. Once in a while, you'd find like just an album sitting there that didn't belong there. Like, what the hell is an Elegy album doing at Tower Records? So, I was like, all right, I guess I have to buy this. And my understanding is that it was a different singer. It came out few years prior to this. So I'm looking forward to this, because this is a band I just never paid enough attention to, and I'm excited to hear that they are coming back together, because that might give me a chance to actually see them live. But another band I actually have categorized as progressive power metal. So it definitely seems to be a vibe this month. The prog vibe with Superior and the Mystery album from last week, and Symphony X and Elegy. I believe the following week will probably break us out of that mold, but it's been enjoyable. Sometimes I just gotta get in touch with my prog side, and we're definitely doing that this month. So, hurrah!
No question about that. It just kind of happened that way, but I'm looking forward to it. I think that many people would say Supremacy is their best album. I don't know that I would agree with that. Again, I think I'm in the minority here, but that's another album at some point we should probably cover, because, like I said, it is another classic mid-90s prog metal album that a lot of people just simply rave about. So we'll get there. But next week, Manifestation of Fear. Thank you to all of our Patreons. We look forward to keeping and obviously getting through all the requests that we've been getting. Consider joining if you like what you hear. And if you don't, just leave us a positive review. Tell a friend. It helps others find the show. And we will come back next week, and then that will bring us right into Prog Power season, which is right around the corner.
I can't believe how close we're getting. I've been listening to Caligula's Horse this week, and I think I may be sold on sticking around, especially with how much rave review their last set at Prog Power got.
They are tight. And if you like the albums, I think you will love the performance. So I just wanted to give you
the week before I spent a considerable amount of time listening to Cryptex, which I'm sold on them. If you wanted to hear Kai Hansen on Broadway, this is your chance. It's really wacky but fun, and I have no basis for this opinion, but I just think they're going to be really cool live. Hopefully it doesn't end up being like a complete disappointment and bomb, because it doesn't seem like they play a ton of live shows. but I'm kind of running out of potential dinner breaks because this lineup is just chock full of bands that I want to see. So I don't know. It's getting to a point where I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think I may be spending most of my 3 days in the venue. I'm just